Now, despite the sluggish global economic recovery, least developed countries in general have enjoyed moderate economic growth. Per capita income for the group as a whole has been expanding steadily. Igor Ponovich, Economic Affairs Officer for Least Developed Countries and Special Programs at UNCTAD, joins us via Skype from Geneva, Switzerland, to look at what it will take for some of these countries to graduate from this category. Igor, thank you so much for making the time to join us. Perhaps let's start off with a definition. How do we define a least developed country?
Well, this is a UN category. The United Nations, the international community, wanted to dedicate a special attention to these countries because they are the poorest countries in the world. The UN is using three criteria. One is low income per capita, the other is economic vulnerability, and the third one is human asset development. Obviously, on all of these, least developed countries are at the bottom of the pyramid.
Let's look at the key findings of the report, if we will, Igor. What does the report say about the economic growth trends for LDCs?
Well, in the last 5 years, the least developed countries have been growing by about 5% on average. Now, if you compare this to Europe, for example, that's very good. But if you compare this to the growth that least developed countries had in the previous decade, that's not as good, because they were growing by more than 7.5% during the 2000s. So the growth has come down considerably, more than 2.5 percentage points for LDCs, and the future also looks less buoyant, less good than it was before. So for these reasons, we think there is a need for proactive policies to get the growth back to the 7% range.
Of course, when you speak about proactive policies, one would think that one of the key focus areas would be taking on jobless growth. How does the report suggest that LDCs should take on jobless growth?
Well, first, let me explain why we are talking about jobless growth in LDCs. While the growth of domestic product was by 7.5%, the employment grew by only 3%, 2.9% in the since the beginning of the millennium. So you see that although there is an expansion of production, the employment is not keeping up with it. So for that reason, we are talking about jobless growth, and we want to propose several policies that would really intensify the job creation in these countries. First of all, macroeconomic policy should be centered not on low inflation, but on job creation and full employment. And for this, it is important to have much stronger fiscal policy, because what we are saying is with the public investment, one can get quite a lot of job creation in these countries, and public investment, of course, is a crucial instrument of the fiscal policy. So monetary policy should not be at the center as before, but fiscal policy.
Of
in
course.
Addition,
go ahead, Igor.
In addition, credit creation is important. If there is no credit coming to especially micro and small enterprises, these enterprises cannot borrow from the private sector, from the banking system. So credit policy through national development banks or some other mechanisms is equally important if we want to have more job creation.
In less than a minute, because we're running out of time, perhaps, Igor, you can touch on how policy should be responding to the opportunities that are thrown up by the urbanization patterns we're seeing on the continent.
Urbanization is a very strong process, both in Africa and in LDCs. The problem with the pattern of urbanization right now is that people are moving from agriculture to urban areas, but to informal sector. Their jobs are low paid, low productivity. So the problem is really how to get to the path of development where these people would move from agriculture to urban centers, but with higher paid jobs, with higher productivity and better jobs. This is what the International Labour Organization calls decent jobs. And we are very much supporting their efforts to provide policy recommendations for LDCs in that direction.